This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV. I'm at AMD's Extravalanza. To my immediate right is none other than Darren McPhee, who is their Director of Marketing. Welcome to the program, Darren.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Thanks for coming out.
We've of course been here before.
Yep.
Last time Extravalanza was 2 years ago, so obviously you're back with a vengeance. Tell us about Extravalanza. Why does AMD put this event on?
Sure. So, I mean, you kind of can't see in the background, but we have a giant banner in our main lobby that says Radeon is gaming. So the key to our strategy is gaming. And if you look at everywhere where our products are being used, that's really the prime use of our graphics cards and where we want to win. So we're in the consoles, we're in your PC, great virtual reality technology here. Everything here is all about gaming. That's what people are excited about. And that's the medium that pushes graphics kind of to the next generation, Now, AMD is I would describe it as like a tenured company. I mean, you've been around forever, and you've been around because you're in the right places at the right time. So what are some of the hot buttons for AMD right now? What are the areas of technology that AMD is primarily interested in right now? That's a very good question. If you look at the things that we're focusing on, I talked a lot about gaming, so our Radeon products, we've got the 295X2, which is on display here today. That's a liquid-cooled, super high-end graphics card, fastest graphics card in the world. That card is really designed for super immersive gaming on 4K panels, that Ultra HD experience, which is kind of the next wave from a PC gaming perspective. So that's something that we're showing here a lot. On the professional side, which is a big part of our business as well, we're showing off the Mac Pro, we're showing off our FirePro W9100. If you look at where we focus, we've got content consumption, which is the gaming side. We've also got content creation, which is what our FirePro products do. So the Mac Pro is a fantastic system for professional content creators. The W9100 also is great for engineers, for video editors. Just provides incredible amounts of compute and graphics rendering power. So we're trying to supply to both sides, really, the people that create the content and then all those gamers out there that want to consume all those games and all that great content that's created.
So what are, when I think of AMD, I think of computational power. I think of CPU processing power, and I think, of course, of graphics processing power. But and of course, the more you have, the better it is year over year over year. What are some of the technologies out there that are driving AMD, that's creating this need for this computational power?
Actually, it's really on both of those sides I just talked about. A couple of years ago, Microsoft really started to look at compute as how do you take more advantage of that in a game. So in DirectX 11, they introduced a feature called Direct Compute. And that basically let game developers take advantage of the compute power from a graphics perspective and take advantage of that parallel processing. So you started to see more games take advantage of the compute side to accelerate things like artificial intelligence and different visual effects. And that's kind of become a main staple of a lot of game developers now. Lighting effects, for example, are accelerated by the compute aspects of the GPU. On the professional side, this has been done for several years, and it's really come to the mainstream. So you see companies like Adobe and Autodesk. In the Hollywood side, a lot of the video editing tools that they're using to edit these, incredible high quality videos, they're all using compute via OpenCL. So they're recognizing that the rendering part of what a GPU can do is just one aspect, that you can add the compute. And what this does is actually save, if you're a content creator, it saves you time, and time is money. If you're creating content. So having both of those sides and accelerating the process, letting you render and see what you're rendering in real time, that's a huge advantage, and that's why compute's so important in that area.
So you'll have to forgive my ignorance. So when we're talking about compute or OpenCL, we're referring to using graphics cards to do what CPUs would normally do?
Exactly. And the thing is, a graphics card, because it's parallel processing based, it can execute multiple tasks, where a CPU has been more serial, so it can do basically one thing at a time. So the GPU has all this incredible compute ability. It can basically multitask a lot better than a CPU can. So, graphics have gone way beyond just rendering an image onto the scene. They're doing all this computational work in the background in parallel while the rendering's happening. And that's why a GPU has become more and more and more important in not just the professional side, but in everyday computer use for users.
Now, one of the big markets, and I have a vested interest in asking this question, is, of course, I work with the Immersive Technology Alliance and Meant to Be Seen. Together, we put on an exhibit with Technolust and Prio VR. And this was upon AMD's request. Why is AMD interested in immersive technology? What's the interest for AMD?
I think it's the next step on where the next generation of immersive experiences go to. You think about the things that we focused on, in the industry anyway, a lot of people think about performance for a graphics card. Yes, we think about performance, but we also think about how do we create that super ultra immersive experience. That's what Eyefinity was. That ability to surround yourselves with extra panels and to see more of your game than you've ever seen before. That's all about getting you more into that game and feeling like you're in that world. So that's a perfect example of kind of our philosophy, and I think the whole virtual reality movement technology, to me, that's an evolution of where things are going, and I think that's where gaming goes next. So we're really excited that you worked with us to set up these things, because that's really what we want to show people. And you know as well as I do, when you put that headset on and you immerse yourself in that game, it's a completely different experience than anything you could see on just a standard panel. That's what I'm excited about. I think that's where games go next.
Now, I'm not a technical person. When I think of graphics processing power, I think of it getting stronger and stronger each year. But the basics of how we get content from, let's say, the graphics card to the display, there have been changes to adjust with the display technology, but it hasn't really required a radical change, unless I'm mistaken. In the case of virtual reality, do you think the graphics card makers like AMD have to start to rethink how they get that image to the display? Is it introducing challenges AMD hasn't really dealt with before?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think one of the big things that pushes the envelope on graphics technology, there's a performance requirement. So, like 4K is a perfect example. Actually, Richard Huddy was interviewed earlier this week, and he said something very interesting. I think he said that to match the experience that you can have with the human eye in terms of having a realistic experience, you probably have to be seeing things at an 8K or a 9K resolution. So we're not even close to being there, right? But every extra pixel you have to push to that GPU requires more performance that the GPU is capable of. So that's one thing. So as virtual reality ramps up and they're pushing more pixels and a more realistic experience, that will have a major effect on how we think about graphics, in the same way that we would for a 4K panel. The other thing as well would be, there's always the performance side, but there's also the feature side as well. What new visual features or techniques are being used. So, I think this is we're in a kind of a pioneer era from virtual reality perspective. The developers are really just starting to think about it. So it's going to be very interesting, but I think certainly there's a performance need. Virtual reality is definitely going to push up the performance requirements for GPUs. And then the next interesting thing is going to be, well, feature-wise, what other things are we going to have to design for in our roadmap going down the line? So where's VR in 2 years from now? From a display technology perspective, from a what resolution will these games be running at? What features are game developers going to be using different features in VR than they would in a typical PC game? We're in the very early stages, so it's going to be very, very interesting.
I know one of the big issues with modern VR is latency. Like, if it's too high, let's say if you move your head around and there's a slight delay, that creates a nausea. Do you know if AMD has had to do any special optimizations to make it more effective with VR technologies?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you said that you're not a technical person. I mean, that's actually, you probably should talk to David Chong, who's our product manager and kind of our own expert on this. So I'm not aware if there is, but I do agree. I mean, this is actually a common issue as well on the cloud gaming side, the latency side. You want to have a real-time experience. When you move in real time, you want it to react in real time. That's probably better a question for a person that's much more technical than I am.
Okay, so let me ask another question, and I don't know if I've never seen it come up in an interview before, and I don't know why it hasn't, so I'm going to ask it. I mean, AMD is in Xbox, it's in Sony, it's in Nintendo. In the time that I've been working in the gaming industry, I've never seen one chip manufacturer across all platforms the way it has. How did AMD manage that? Like, can you elaborate a little bit as to how that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't go too in depth, and I'm not even aware of kind of the background. But I think the logical person would see, yes, AMD has this great graphics business, and we have this great CPU business. But if you look at what's being used in these consoles, particularly the Xbox and the console, they really got passionate about the APU. That we had this piece of silicon that had a GPU and a CPU on it. That really had a balanced workload. So there's the graphics technology. Obviously, that's very important to make sure that you've got kind of next-gen graphics. But that architecture that we have of CPU and GPU, it gave them a complete solution that they could use. I think that was the major thing.
Now, another thing I've heard is that the content we create on console is now more compatible with PC, or at least the linkage is stronger. Is there truth to that? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I definitely think there's some truth to that. To go a level deeper than that, we have a technology. Actually, there's a lot of people walking around today with T-shirts that say Mantle on it. And for those people that don't know what Mantle is actually a programming, an API that AMD created. And basically what it does is it gives developers low-level access to our GPUs. By low-level, I mean they get more access than a kind of a standard API like a DirectX. So it lets them do way more with our GPUs, and the programming language is much easier for them to use. So they can do it quickly, and they can do it more efficiently, and they can churn out much better performance using Mantle than they can DirectX, as an example. The reason Mantle exists is because we had the console business. So all the game developers in the world are developing games on Radeon graphics. So to create this API language, we looked at what's happening on the console side. They have their own unique APIs that they use. And what we found was the APIs being used in Sony and Microsoft have that same approach, very low level, customized programming language that gives you direct access to the metal of we call the metal, but basically the heart of the GPU. Right. So we took that same philosophical approach, and that's what Mantle is. It's low-level access to our hardware. That's really the connection. And now we have 7 developers, we have 4 major game engines, and we have 20+ games already using Mantle, and more to come. Lots of more exciting announcements this year. But if you see that and you hear developers talk about it, they're excited because the Mantle development time and what they're able to do with that on Radeon GPUs is just phenomenal compared to the development time and the performance they could get out of DirectX before that.
Can you give a measurable range of performance improvement over what we would normally have experienced? Yeah,
number one, it really depends by the game, but it could be anywhere. If you compared a DirectX 11 version of a game versus a Mantle version of the same game, the same scene, the same settings, you could see, depending on the CPU GPU combination, you can see anywhere from a 20 to an 80% performance advantage in Mantle, which is pretty phenomenal. The other thing that it does too is because it's optimized for our GPUs, sorry. But the other thing that it does as well is that it really removes CPU bottlenecks. So it helps create a more balanced platform. You can save dollars on CPU and invest in GPU and get much more out of your PC. So there's a good economical story about this as well in terms of how do you build a PC? What's more important? So it's very interesting. And in reality, Mantle's been out for just about 6 months. It launched in January in Battlefield 4. We're just scratching the surface of what developers can do. So there's a lot of exciting things to come.
Very exciting stuff. One more thing. I understand there's kind of, I call it a revolution in the way we handle VSync. I think you know whatever. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to what AMD is doing in that technology?
Absolutely. So we have some demonstrations here as well. We call it FreeSync. So it's a dynamic refresh rate, and it just basically creates a smoother gameplay experience. So when you're at 30 hertz or 60 hertz, you're kind of at a set refresh rate in the panel. So you may see some jitters in the panel or a little bit of visual anomalies, let's say. But FreeSync dynamically adjusts the refresh rate, so you always get a smooth gameplay experience. What's great about this is we call it FreeSync because it's basically free. There is no special hardware that's required. It's been built into the Visa DP 1.2 spec. So in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to start seeing panels on the market, DisplayPort panels that will have this technology already built in. There's not going to be an incremental charge for this. The panel prices that you see now will be able to launch FreeSync-based panels at the same price levels because there's no added hardware required. And the end result is going to be gamers are going to get a smoother, kind of just a better experience from a visual perspective.
So I know you're saying it's a smoother experience. Can you describe what the big problem would have been before versus what it's going to be like today?
I guess the best way to describe it, from a visual perspective, is sometimes you might see a line going through your panel, kind of a little jitter. It almost looks like you're dropping a frame or something like that, but you'll actually see a line in some cases. There's different ways that this comes out, but that's the more common one. So if you're a gamer, if you're buying our graphics, you want to have the best experience. This has actually been a challenge in the industry for years and years and years. What it does basically, it just the image on the screen stays clean. It stays, and the frame rate, you're not having the same amount of drop frames. You're not getting those visual anomalies as well.
Excellent, excellent. So one more question about Extravalanza. I think it's even bigger this year than it was the last time I was here 2 years ago. What are some of the highlights on the show floor?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I think when we did this about 2 years ago, we had 650 to 700 people come through the doors over the 6 hours. I think we had 1,400 or 1,500 people register, and we think we've already blown away the numbers. So, we're expecting to get north of 1,200 people. What's different this year, I think, when we did it 2 years ago, the consoles weren't here. We weren't showing that story. We didn't have, obviously, these really cool VR demos, and the partner presence as well. We've got fantastic AIB partners, our reseller partners as well, like Canada Computers and NCIX, and it's just been a bigger approach. We've had more support from folks like yourself helping us promote this. We really believe that the AMD Markham campus is kind of like one of the best kept secrets in Ontario and maybe Canada. People don't realize how much comes out of this office, especially when you look at all the things that are on display here. The business unit for those products and those technologies lives here, which is something everyone should be proud of.
I always tell people, and I hope it's the right thing to say, is that some of AMD's biggest successes are based right here in this office. It's like the best kept secret of the AMD, of the AMD world.
Yeah, and it's the other thing too is we realized this week, we were just doing a little bit of math. This was originally the ATI offices. That was incorporated in 1985. So this is the 30th year that we've been creating great graphics technology, so it's perfect to have this within this year to celebrate 30 years of all the great GPUs and technology that have been developed in this office.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us, Darren. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for coming out. We really appreciate having you here.
This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV at AMD's Extravalanza. Of course, we'll be back with more. Thank you for watching.